Your life as a winning poker player. Level 1. The first hand. The chips go in before you're ready. Not because someone pushed you, because the blinds don't wait. You're at a $1, $2 table at a casino you drove 2 hours to reach, and the dealer is already looking at you, and everyone else at the table has been here long enough to know exactly what you are. You're the new money. You have $300 in front of you. It took you 3 weeks to save it. You told yourself it was an experiment, a test. You've watched 400 hours of poker content online, and you know the theory: position, pot odds, implied odds, the mathematics of expected value. You know the theory the way someone knows how to swim by reading about it. Then you get in the water. The first hour you fold everything. The second hour you call 2 hands you should have folded and win 1, which is worse than losing both because it teaches you the wrong lesson. By hour 3, you're down $180, and you've learned something the videos couldn't teach. Knowing what to do and doing it are separated by a gap that only pressure can reveal. You order a coffee. You count your remaining chips, $120. The game is nothing like you thought it would be. It's quieter, more internal. 9 people at a table, and the real action is happening in each person's head, invisible, a conversation no one is having out loud. The physical cards are almost beside the point. What matters is the information, what you know, what they think you know, what you've shown them, what you've hidden. You lose the $120 in the next 40 minutes. You drive home in the dark and you think about the 3 specific hands where you made the wrong decision and exactly why. Not the bad beats, the bad decisions. The distinction is everything, and you already understand it, which means you're not like most people who will sit at that table. Most people blame the cards. You blame yourself. That's why you'll be back. Level 2. The student. 3 months later, and you've played 47 sessions. You track every one of them in a spreadsheet: date, hours, buy-in, result, notes on significant hands. The spreadsheet is not yet interesting. It shows a player who is approximately break-even, which means you're beating the rake only some of the time, which means you're technically losing. But the notes column is detailed and honest, and the notes are where the real work happens. You've identified 3 specific leaks in your game, not general weaknesses, specific, quantifiable patterns where your decision-making produces negative expected value. You call too wide from out of position, you don't barrel enough on favorable textures, you give up too much equity in multi-way pots. These are solvable problems, problems you can work on with software, with study, with the deliberate repetition that turns understanding into reflex. You've also started to understand something that no training material addresses directly. The game is a social system, and the social system has its own information. The man in seat 4 who checks his phone every time he has a strong hand. The woman in seat 7 who breathes differently when she's bluffing. The regular in the gray hoodie who everyone calls Bear, who hasn't looked at his cards in the first 20 minutes because he's spent that time mapping everyone else at the table. You watch Bear. Bear doesn't play hands. Bear plays people. 2 months of watching Bear teaches you more than the previous 6 months of study, because Bear shows you what the game actually is. The cards are just the pretext. The game is information management. Every action communicates something. The question is never what to do. It's what message your action sends and whether that message serves your actual objective, and whether the person receiving it has the sophistication to read it correctly. You start playing fewer hands. You play them better. The spreadsheet begins to change. At the end of month 4, you're up $1,400 over 61 sessions. Not enough to matter as money, enough to matter as signal. You are learning the language. Level 3. The grinder. 6 months in and you've made a decision. You're playing 4 days a week, not as a hobby anymore, as a discipline. The sessions run 6 to 8 hours, which means poker is consuming more of your available time than anything else in your life except sleep. Your friends have started asking if you're okay. You are okay.
You are in fact more focused than you've been about anything in years. The focus feels like health, even though it looks, from the outside, like obsession. The $1, $2 tables have become too small, not because you've beaten them conclusively, you haven't, not in the sample size that constitutes proof, but because the edges available there are limited by the skill ceiling of the player pool. You've moved to $2, $5. The stakes are 5 times larger, the players are better, the margins are thinner, and the game is genuinely harder in a way that makes you feel, for the first time in months, that you're being stretched. This is where poker separates itself from most competitive activities. The difficulty scales with your success. You can't outwork the system into a comfortable position, because the better you get, the better your opponents get, not because they improve, but because the money you're winning selects for the tables where you face the toughest competition. The game maintains its difficulty automatically. The only people who don't realize it are the ones who aren't good enough yet to reach the tables where it becomes obvious. You clear $3,800 in month 7. It's the first month the number is real. But the month after that, you lose $2,200, and the loss is not bad luck. It's a 3-week period where your decision-making degrades because you've been running good for so long that you've started conflating results with process. The $2,200 is tuition. You pay it. You go back to the spreadsheet. The psychological management is the part no one tells you about. Not the management of other people, the management of yourself. The specific discipline of separating outcome from decision quality, session after session, for months, without letting the natural human desire for narrative, for meaning, for the story that says good decisions win and bad decisions lose, corrupt your analysis. Bad decisions win all the time in the short run. Good decisions lose. The only thing that matters is whether the decision was correct given the information available. Everything else is noise. You live in the noise. This takes longer than learning the technical game.
Level 4, the professional. 14 months in, and poker is your income, not supplemental income. Income. You cleared $67,000 last year, which means you cleared more from poker than from the job you quit in month 9. The job was a good job. Quitting it was the kind of decision that looks insane from the outside and obvious from the inside, which is what most significant decisions look like. You play $5, $10 now, some $10, $25. You travel, not often, but specifically, the rooms where the games run better, where the player pools are softer relative to the stakes, where the rake structure doesn't bleed your edge before you can realize it. You've learned which casinos run games that are genuinely profitable and which ones are theaters of action where the house always wins eventually. Your skill set is expanded beyond technical play. You now manage a bankroll, a specific sum kept separate from your living expenses, managed with the discipline of a fund manager, because that's essentially what you are. You have variance reduction strategies. You have move up and move down thresholds. You have, built over 14 months of data, a precise understanding of your own edge at various stakes, and a realistic projection of what that edge produces in annual income given your current volume. The number is specific, approximately $90,000 to $120,000 per year at current stakes, with meaningful risk of a 5-figure downswing in any given quarter. You've made your peace with the risk. What you haven't fully processed is what the life costs outside the money. You've been in 3 relationships since you started playing seriously. All 3 ended in a version of the same conversation, the person across from you explaining that they feel like they're competing with the game for your attention, and you unable to explain that they're not wrong exactly, but that what they're experiencing as absence is actually presence. Presence in a different room, at a different table, where you're more yourself than you are anywhere else. You stop trying to explain it. You play. Level 5, the edge. 2 years in and you've discovered something that most players at your level pretend doesn't exist. The game has a ceiling. Not a technical ceiling. There is always more to learn. The game's complexity is functionally infinite. A practical ceiling. The ceiling of what live poker at standard casino stakes can produce for a player of your skill level, given the rake, given the variance, given the hours required. The ceiling is real, and it's not high enough. The players who break through it do one of three things. They move to high-stakes private games where the competition is different and the rake is absent or negligible. They add an income stream, coaching, content, consultation, or they find a way to play more efficiently, which usually means online, which means a different game with different skills. You've chosen the private games. The entry into private games is not merit-based in the way that casino play is. At a casino, you can sit at any table that has an open seat. Private games run on invitation, on vouching, on the social architecture of trust between people who are risking significant sums in an informal setting with no institutional protection. Your first invitation comes through a player you've developed a genuine relationship with over 8 months of shared sessions. He mentions, without elaborating, that he knows a Thursday game. The stakes are $25, $50. The players, he says, are recreational. He says this in the specific tone that communicates, I am vouching for you, which means my reputation is attached to your behavior. You understand the weight of that immediately. The Thursday game is in a private residence. 8 players, a dedicated dealer, better food than any casino you've been in, and the specific atmosphere of a room where everyone has real money and no one is performing. The recreational players are recreational in the way that someone who casually skis black diamond runs is recreational. Technically not professional, but dangerous. You win $4,200 your first night. You don't celebrate. Celebrating would be the wrong read. You thank the host, you tip the dealer appropriately, you leave at a reasonable hour. You're invited back the following Thursday. Level 6, the Insider. 3 years in and you're a regular at 4 private games across 2 cities. Your monthly income has restructured itself. The casino grind is background now, maintenance, a way of staying sharp and visible in the community. The real money comes from the private games, where the stakes run from $50, $100 to occasional $200, $400 sessions, and where a good night means $15,000 to $25,000, and a bad night means something you don't let yourself think about in those terms. The social architecture of the private game world is its own ecosystem. There are hosts, people who run the games, manage the logistics, ensure the money moves correctly and the environment stays controlled. There are regulars, players whose consistent presence make the games viable. There are fish, the recreational players whose losses fund the ecosystem. And there are people like you, professional-grade players who exist in the uncomfortable middle position of being good enough to consistently win from the recreational players and needing the recreational players to keep showing up. This creates a specific tension. If you win too obviously, too quickly, the recreational player doesn't come back. If the recreational player doesn't come back, the game doesn't run. If the game doesn't run, your income disappears. So there's an invisible code in the private game world about how you win, not whether you win, but the manner of it, the speed, the social management of the losing player's experience so that the losing feels acceptable enough to repeat. You've learned the code. You've also learned something about yourself that you file away rather than examine. You are good at making people comfortable while taking their money. The skill is real. The application of the skill is something you've made a decision not to look at directly, because the looking doesn't help you, and the not looking is, at this level, a professional requirement. You cleared $340,000 last year. It doesn't touch your bank account in any documented way that would interest anyone looking at your tax returns.
Level 7, the Ghost. 4 years in, and very few people know what you do. Not because you hide it, because you've learned that the most effective form of concealment is a boring explanation. You tell people you work in finance. Most people nod and move on. Finance is legible. Finance sounds like something that happens in offices with spreadsheets. Finance doesn't prompt the specific sequence of questions that poker produces. Is that legal? Can you really make money doing that? What about luck? The questions aren't hostile, usually. They're just exhausting. And more than exhausting, they reveal the gap between how the game looks from outside and what it actually is, and the gap is too large to bridge in a casual social conversation, so you've stopped trying. You've also stopped maintaining certain relationships, not dramatically, gradually. The friends who existed in the life before this have become people you see twice a year, and the conversations are warm but shallow because the things that occupy your mind, the specific dynamics of a particular game, the player you've been studying for 3 months, the bankroll decision you're trying to make, are not things you can share with someone whose context for poker is movies and casual home games. You exist, increasingly, in a world of people who understand what you do. That world is small. The best player you know, a man who has been doing this for 12 years, who you've learned more from watching than anything else, told you once, over a meal neither of you remembered ordering, that the game eventually becomes the only company you fully trust, not the players, the game itself. Because the game is honest in a way that almost nothing else in life is. It tells you what you are. It doesn't care what you want to be. You've been thinking about that for 18 months. Level 8. The room. 5 years. You don't count sessions anymore. You count years. The granularity has changed because the granularity of a single session no longer means anything. A single session is noise, and you've internalized the separation of noise from signal so completely that the individual hand, the individual night, the individual month has lost its psychological weight. What remains is the structure. You play in 7 private games, 3 cities. The stakes at the highest of them run $500 to $1,000, with effective stacks of $200,000 to $400,000. The players at this level are different in a way that is difficult to articulate to anyone who hasn't seen it. They are not better at the technical game. Some of them are worse. What they are is different in their relationship to the money. At $1, $2, a $300 loss is significant. At this level, the number has been abstracted past its meaning. The chips are code for something that has become purely theoretical. You have won and lost more money in single sessions than most people earn in a year. You have sat across from people who have lost $3 million at poker and could afford to lose $3 million more. You have, somewhere in year 4, stopped feeling the variance. This is not peace. It looks like peace from the outside. From the inside is the specific emotional flatness that comes from having subjected your nervous system to an intensity of repeated high-stakes experience that the nervous system eventually stops registering as high stakes. The table that used to feel like standing at the edge of something now feels like a room you know too well. Every room you know too well feels like that. You're worth, conservatively, $2.3 million. The number lives in accounts and assets that have been structured carefully and legally over 5 years with the specific assistance of people who understand how self-employed income in irregular amounts is properly managed. You don't have a schedule. You don't have a boss. You don't have a performance review or a meeting you're dreading on Tuesday. You have the game, and the game has you. At 3 a.m. in a hotel room in a city you visit 4 times a year for a game that runs every other month, you review the significant hands from tonight's session the way you have reviewed significant hands for 5 years. Not because you have to, because it's the last thing that requires your full attention. Everything else became manageable. The game is still honest. You're not sure what that costs. You're not sure the cost is finished being calculated. Somewhere tonight, a casino 2 hours from here has a $1, $2 table running. There's someone sitting down for the first time. They've watched hundreds of hours of content. They know the theory. They think they understand the gap between knowing and doing. They have $300 in front of them. They're going to lose it. They're going to drive home in the dark thinking about the hands they played wrong, and they're going to be back. That's how it starts. That's always how it starts. The game has been here longer than any of us. It'll be here after.